Hello and good evening. If you're just coming in, this is Stars Over Springfield. Sorry we had some last minute technical problems, but here we are. So we'll have people, it looks like people are coming on. Give folks a chance to get in. Attendee list is moving up there, so we'll give folks a chance to get in. Good. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. So we are here tonight to preview star watching in 2021 and specifically in January of 2021. My name is Kevin Kopchinski. I am a planetarium and STEM educator at the Springfield Science Museums. And I'm here with Rich Sanderson, who is the president of the Springfield STARS Club. We at the museum really appreciate the STARS Club. They help us out with this event and with other things, other events, other astronomy events at the museum as well. And Rich, would you like to say a couple things about the club right now?
Sure, Kevin, thank you. And welcome to everybody to Stars Over Springfield. This program is a really fun family event that the Science Museum and the Springfield STARS Club have done jointly for quite a few years now. And it's been a lot of fun for folks to come to the museum prior to the pandemic in the evening and actually get to look through the big 20-inch telescope on the museum roof that the STARS Club built back in the 1970s. And that, of course, will resume once the pandemic is over and we're able to start meeting again at the museum. But I'm really glad that Kevin and Mike Kerr and all the folks at the museum have been able to do a Zoom version of this so that we can continue to offer folks a little bit of astronomy once a month. And the Springfield STARS Club is a fairly old organization in Springfield. It was founded 86 years ago, and it began as a telescope makers club. It was founded by a man named Carl Alsing, who lived in Wilbraham. He worked at Westinghouse, and he was interested in building his own telescope and using it to view the night sky. And at Westinghouse, there was a small group of people that shared his interest. So they formed a club called the STARS, which was an acronym for Springfield Telescope and Reflector Society. Reflector being a type of telescope that the amateurs were making back then. And then he found out that people in the community outside of Westinghouse wanted to be part of the club and learn how to build telescopes. So it kind of grew from there. Nowadays, we're not really a telescope making club. There's no requirements to build a telescope like there was back in the 30s. We're more of a general astronomy club that focuses on all aspects of the science and on a popular level. We have speakers every month talking about different aspects of astronomy, and sometimes they might be slightly technical talks, but most of them are popular level, non-technical, aimed at people that are interested in science and interested in astronomy, but you don't need a degree in calculus or advanced physics or anything like that. It's more for fun and to share our common love of the night sky. And it's something that many of us are passionately interested in and have been since our childhood. And so you would meet people of all ages and all levels of expertise, and you're welcome to join the club. Again, you don't have to be an expert, or you know, if you're a beginner, you're more than welcome. We can provide a lot of information to help out folks who have telescopes and don't know how to use them. And it's a good place to learn a little bit about the nighttime sky. Because of the pandemic, we've also been doing Zoom meetings. Normally, the STARS Club meets in the Tolman Auditorium at the museum, and we've been meeting at the museum since the 1950s. But we've been interrupted by the pandemic and have been doing it over Zoom, and the meetings will resume at the museum once this is over. just like Stars Over Springfield. So we meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock from September through May. And we've waived our membership fee. We usually have a $25 a year membership fee to support the club for all members. But because we're doing Zoom meetings and not meeting at the museum, and some of our expenses are down because of that, we've waived our membership fee. So if you'd like to join the club, you don't have to fill out any papers or send any money. All you have to do is send me an email. And my email address is rhs31416@yahoo.com. rhs31416@yahoo.com. And just send me an email and say you want to have your name put on our email list, and you'll start receiving notices whenever we have a meeting, and you can join us for our meetings on the fourth Tuesday. And we also share our meetings with other clubs in New England, and they share their meetings with us, especially a club in Rhode Island, the Astronomical Society of Rhode Island, who has some dynamite speakers. And so if you join our club, you'll also get Zoom links to their meetings as well. So you can see what the folks in Rhode Island are doing, and they have some really interesting speakers as well. So there's a lot to do in amateur astronomy, and it's a lot of fun. So just drop me an email if you want to join the club. And again, once we start meeting again at the museum, we'll think about what membership fees will be. But for now, there's no fee of any kind. Just pop me an email and you'll be on our list.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, I just put Rich's email into the chat. So feel free to reach out to him and get those links for the meeting there. And also, I should add that the Springfield Stars Club now has a kind of a nice newsletter. One of their members, one of the younger members, is writing a newsletter every month describing things coming up in the sky, very much in the spirit of what we're going to do here tonight. So if you want to catch some other things that I don't get to mention, you can subscribe to the Starry Scoop. And if you would like to do that, you can send an email to starryscoop@gmail.com, and she'll put you on the mailing list, and you'll start getting that every month. So yeah, as I said, this is sort of in the spirit of going in and seeing what we can observe and going into 2021. We've got a tough act to follow. Historic planetary conjunction last month, and there's nothing really a whole lot like that coming up this year. But I don't think there really needs to be something like that to go on out and enjoy the sky. If you can get out on just any random clear night, because it seems like it's random when there are clear nights, you can look around and you'll be seeing some of the cycles of nature as the stars progress through the seasons, as the moon progresses through its phases every month, as the planets move in their orbits. These are things that people way back, our ancient ancestors really had to be tuned into a lot more. Today, it's more of maybe a hobby or a pastime, but it certainly is a very rewarding one. And the nice thing is, you don't need to have a clear sky on a specific day at a specific time to see this specific thing. So let's dig in a little bit and see, see what there is to notice. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's do share screen. And now I'm going to apologize. I'm going to apologize ahead of time as I share my screen. Very often I lose track of the chat and the participant list. The Zoom platform has a lot to be desired as far as making this easy for presenters. So if we don't respond to the chat right away, we're not ignoring you. We're just losing track. I think I've got it. Somebody, okay, so I see somebody did put the email for Starry Scoop in there. And Caitlin, who is the author of Starry Scoop, has responded. Yes, so we do have the right email, and and Caitlin, thank you for reminding me. Yes, Starry Scoop now has a Facebook page, so you can go ahead and look for that on Facebook as well. Okay, so is everybody seeing a simulated star view right now?
Yep, I see what looks like Orion the Hunter.
Yeah, and Orion is there. Yes. Okay. Yeah, and this is another thing that the interface does not allow me to see what you see. So I've got it up there. I have my screen shared, and it's sort of an act of faith that you'll all see this. So great. Yeah, so we're looking at the night sky. I've set it up to be about 6 o'clock tonight, which was roughly the onset of being dark enough to see a lot of stars. It takes about an hour or so after the sun goes down to be able to see a lot of stars. You can see a few things before that, especially brighter things. But again, that's what it will usually take. Now, the one thing that if you're going to go out and look at the sky every few days, or maybe even just once a week, as the month goes on, you're going to notice something. We've passed the milestone on the 2nd. We were at perihelion. Perihelion is at the point at which the Earth is closest to the sun in its orbit. Yes, and I did get that right. We were closest to the sun on January 2nd. Yes, even though it's winter and it's cold. The seasons are more due to the tilt of the Earth's axis than the distance from the sun. It's as far as planets go, our orbit is actually almost round, and there's not a big difference between the closest and the furthest distance. So we're moving along that orbit, and we are heading towards summer. And so one thing is, if you go out by the end of the month, if you go out, start looking at the stars at 6 o'clock, it's going to get a little bright, and you'll still be able to. And let's just take a quick peek at that. Here's 6 o'clock at the end of the month, and it's actually kind of getting dusky out there. And you may have to start waiting until 6:30, or probably 6:15, to start looking at the sky. So that's one thing right away that you'll notice, that it'll stay a little bit brighter each day. And really, if you watch from one day to the next, it's not going to be easily noticeable. But after a few days, it adds up. We gain, the sun sets about 35 minutes later by the end of the month than it started at the beginning of the month. Okay, so let's come on back to today. And let's get back to the east. And yes, in the east, one of the things we're looking at is Orion the Hunter. Orion is just clearing the horizon now, or at the onset of darkness. And that's classic winter. When you go out and it's just gotten dark and you can see that Orion has cleared the horizon, yeah, it's wintertime. And of course, by then it's sort of too late, but people in ancient times would have been noticing Orion sort of coming up earlier and earlier in the evening throughout the fall, and they would know that winter is getting closer and closer. And now, it's here, and here's Orion to show us. Orion is the hunter in the Greek stories, and actually he's seen, or these stars are seen as a person in many cultures. It's not that bad of a person's torso. The two bright stars above are the shoulders. Down below, we have the knees. Sometimes this star is shown as a raised foot rather than a knee. And then the three stars on the belt here are, or on the waist, are the belt of Orion. So we sort of have a person's torso, and he starts out the evening down in the east, kind of sideways. Robert Frost had a line about that in one of his poems. So there it is. It's got more bright stars in it than any other constellation. Just above is Taurus the bull. It's got a bright eye, a dim eye, a snout, and a couple of horns. And that's about it. Just the snout and the horns. That's all there really is of this bull in the sky. Just enough of a maybe resemblance to a bull face, perhaps. Up above, we've got a little bunch of stars here. This is the Pleiades, the seven sisters. Now, they are technically part of Taurus. The constellation of Taurus takes up a fairly large area there. So they are not their own constellation, but they are their own star group, and they have their own legends all around the world, and all through time have had their own identity in star lore. In Japan, they have a name for these stars. It sort of means togetherness, and they called it Subaru, and they named a car company after it. Coming back down and maybe moving over to the left here, and a little bit more to the northeast, we've got two stars. These are the twin stars of Gemini. The twin, and people saw these two stars. It reminded them two of a kind, and so you've got some kind of story or something that assigns sort of two of a kind to this constellation. And moving up above, you may notice this big bright thing there, or this big thing. This is the star Capella and the constellation Auriga the Charioteer. Capella is a pretty bright constellation. Now, in a simulated star view like this, whether it's this or whether it's our planetarium in the museum, in order to show a bright star, and I see somebody has raised their hand. If you just go ahead and put something in the chat, we will try to we'll help you out. We show bright things as being big. That's really the only way to do it in a simulation. When you're outside, everything's going to look about the same size, but some will be noticeably brighter than others. And then over here, this other bright thing, this is Mars. Okay, so that's now our one prominent planet in the sky is Mars. We'll get back to planets in a minute. Let's just go ahead and take a look over in the east. I'm sorry, over in the west. We were just in the east. Over in the west, we got three bright stars, very low. This is the summer triangle. And yeah, it is called the summer triangle. And the reason is that it becomes prominent in the sky in the summer. Now it's in the west, and it's going to be gone throughout the month. Up above the summer triangle, we've got a square. This is the great square of Pegasus, and that's probably the brightest fall constellation there is. And again, it's over in the western sky now, and every day, if you go out again at a consistent time, you're going to notice everything in the west getting lower and lower. And finally, let's take a peek to the north. And in the north sky, we've got the Big Dipper, very low down there and kind of tilted up on its handle right now. If you've been watching through the months, and in the last couple of months, it was very low to the horizon, and now it's kind of starting on its way up. If we follow the two stars on the end, we come to the North Star, Polaris. Polaris is the center of the apparent motion of the stars. Our North Pole, the axis of our Earth's rotation, points almost directly at this star. So in the north, all the stars appear to go around that in a circle. And the Big Dipper sort of started on its way up here. Now, again, by the end of the month, let's just see how that all changes. Okay, so first of all, at the same time of day, it's going to be, or same time of evening, it's going to be brighter by the end of the month. maybe again at 6 o'clock, it's still dark enough to see things. And we can see that by then the Dipper has even moved up further. And maybe now we can make out that last star on the handle down there that we weren't seeing toward the beginning of the month. If we move back to the west, the only thing that's left of the summer triangle is that one star, and the Pegasus has gotten a lot lower in the sky. And now let's move to the east. So basically in the west, things are getting lower every day. Again, we're talking that you're coming out at a consistent time each time that you look. I'm kind of starting this at roughly the onset of darkness. Maybe you start later in the evening, maybe you start 8 o'clock, something like that. And so if you do go out at 8 o'clock instead, things will be a little further along, but the amount of change from the beginning of the month to the end of the month will be very similar. So we've got the summer triangle just about gone now, and moving over again, in the south, Mars is very prominent, and getting back over to the east, we see in the east things get higher. So Orion, Taurus, Pleiades have all gotten up higher into the sky, and now underneath of Orion, we see Sirius, the Dog Star. This is the brightest star of the night sky, and it's the brightest star in Canis Major, the big dog. So this guy's a hunter, Orion. He needs a dog. Where are you going to put the dog? You need to put it near the hunter. So there are some other stars down there, and that's where the dog was made. This one doesn't look a whole lot like what it's called, but when constellations were being made, that was not really the intent. People were making constellations to try to make a system to remember and understand the sky and correctly identify things. And again, we look at these patterns, and it's again, sort of maybe it's a hobby, or it's something that we do just for a little recreation or something. But these people in ancient times really depended on knowing the stars, because that was their only reliable indication of the way to anticipate the coming of the seasons and plant their crops. And they had to get the crops right. They couldn't go to the grocery store if they messed up the crops. So the crops were their grocery store. So very important to them to know this stuff and to know it well. And that's just what they did. Okay, so we've got that's sort of how the stars will change through the months. Things will get higher in the east. You'll see new things by the end of the month. You'll lose things out towards the west toward the end of the month. Another thing about this set of stars here, this winter constellations, is that we have, and I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit darker here. Let's move to a slightly later time. Oh, let's just make it 7. That's just going to be easy. And just get these stars and maybe in a little more of their glory, so to speak. In this area, we have stars in all stages of star development, so to speak. Stars start out in clouds of gas that collapse due to gravity and begin to do nuclear fusion. And below Orion's belt, there is such an area. It's called the Orion Nebula. If you're in a dark enough sky, or maybe using binoculars or something, you might notice a fuzzy patch down there. That's the Orion Nebula, and that's where stars are being formed. Well, and in a nebula, there's a bunch of stars being formed, and so they're usually formed in a group. And sure enough, the Pleiades up here are a group of young stars that were all formed together, and astronomically speaking, not that long ago. So if a star forms with a lot of gas and maybe is very, very much bigger than our sun, you might get a star like Rigel here, this star on the lower right of Orion. Orion's a hot star, hotter than our sun, bigger than our sun, several tens of times bigger in mass than our sun. But such a star that is very hot also does not last very long. So this star will not last nearly as long as our sun will. When this star does use up its hydrogen, it will expand into a red supergiant. And sure enough, at the other end of Orion, we've got a red supergiant, a Betelgeuse. So this has used up all its, or just about all its hydrogen, is cooled off in temperature. That's why it's reddish and expanding in size. This is hundreds of times larger than our sun in size, in diameter. Now our sun, as I mentioned, is not as big as this. So our sun is not going to become a red supergiant. It's just going to become a red giant, like this one, Aldebaran, the big eye of the bull here. And this is just tens of times, many tens of times bigger than the sun, not hundreds. But it's also cooler in temperature, so it's got this more reddish color to it. And eventually that just puffs off or blows off a lot of gas, and there's a remnant behind. It's called a planetary nebula. If you look on Hubble, the planetary nebula pictures from Hubble are probably some of the most beautiful pictures there are of things in the night sky. So you've got a little bit of that to look at too, as you're looking at the stars. Well, as for the planets, there's Mars. And as I mentioned, Mars is pretty much our only prominent planet now. If you were out looking at the conjunction in late December, I'm sure you noticed that the planets Jupiter and Saturn were really down pretty low in the west. And so by, let's see, this is now at 7 o'clock. By 7 o'clock, they are gone. They are long gone. It's wonderful working with the simulations. You can just play with time in all kinds of ways. Let's see, let's go back to about 5, and that's maybe a little too early. Okay, so there, and let's see, we have, this is saying about 5 after 5, which is barely half an hour after sunset. So the sky is going to be really bright, but Jupiter is fairly bright. So if you've got a very low horizon, you might see that. I don't know about Saturn. That's going to be a rough one, really. It's not as bright, and it's going to be lost in that twilight. If you have a perfectly flat western horizon, maybe with a little elevation or something, maybe as as it gets towards darkness. But as we saw, we got Mercury sort of coming in the picture this month. And if we move to the 11th, do you see that one pop up there? That's Mercury. There it is, right? That's Mercury again. And on the 11th, Mercury is going to be up there near Jupiter and Saturn, but very, very, very low in the western sky and just about at twilight. So you're going to need exceptionally good sight to see that. And if you know of a place like that, good luck. Again, this is one of the things where you're going to need a clear sky on the 11th, right at that time, right as it's as the sun, just after the sun goes down. But good luck. Maybe you'll see that. That'll be kind of interesting if you can. Otherwise, they're pretty much out of the picture. They're as we're orbiting, as they're orbiting, they're coming into the line of view of the sun, and we're not going to be able to see them in a couple of months. They will be coming out in the morning, just before dawn, and then you can see them at that point. But we're kind of losing them now. Mercury's another thing here. Let's see, that's Mercury, right? Okay, so if we notice, as I go from day to day, Mercury is getting higher and higher, and then look at this on the 14th. Okay, on the 14th we have a crescent moon and Mercury. Now, again, look at how low that is in the sky, and what time it is. you know, it's being go a little bit later, 5:15. It's a race basically between, will it get dark enough to see this before they set? And again, with a really nice flat horizon, maybe you'll see that. Let's get back to a darker sky. And then in the south, we are going to no problem seeing Mars. We'll be able to see that all month, nice and high in the southern sky, in very dark skies. And now Mars is close to us as far as planets go, and so its apparent motion is very much. As you saw, Mercury kind of just jumped up into the scene, and I just remembered actually with Mercury, it will actually be a little bit easier to see Mercury later in the month, somewhere around, I believe, the 21st or the 22nd. Mercury will be higher in the sky, and maybe more possible to see. However, there will be no other planets and there will be no moon at that time. So you might see that. I've got another picture I might try to bring up in a minute to show you how that works. But with Mars being closer to us as a planet, and it's orbiting through the sky, it's orbiting the sun just as we are. We're orbiting. As both of these planets change positions, it makes the planets look like they move against the stars. And with Mars, the motion is fairly fast. And so, for example, this is going to be in a few days on the 14th. Just up above Mars, there's a couple of stars. These are the stars of Aries. So bright, they're sort of brighter stars, not really very bright, and so you can see Mars sort of underneath, by then sort of underneath the leftmost of those stars. By the end of the month, Mars is going to have moved out. And what I want to do to show you that is, first of all, go a little further into the evening. And now, if I advance day by day, every day, if you come out at the same time, the stars look like they're a little bit higher. If they're in the south, they're going to look like they're a little bit more towards the west. In the east, they're a little bit higher than they were the night before. And so if I move day by day, everything kind of jumps. And here comes the moon, and that's not as easy to see perhaps what's happening with Mars. So I'm going to jump in a different sort of a way that it's called a sidereal day, where we're just going to jump a little less than a day, about 4 minutes less than a day, and the stars are exactly in the same place as they were the day before. And when we do that, we see the moon and Mars move against the background of the stars. And this is the 20th, and it looks like the moon will come to pay a visit with Mars on the 20th. It will be looks like roughly a first quarter moon at that point. And so watching the moon, watching the phases of the moon, but the moon as it moves through the sky will pass by any planet that's prominent. We'll get sort of, as I say, a visit from the moon every month. So here, this is going to be for the January. Again, it looks like around January 20th. But not for the moon, it's not just the planets that it visits. It also visits the constellations, so to speak. And if we we'll just go ahead and sort of do a regular day. We'll see as we get towards the 23rd, we've got the moon right near Taurus. And as we get on a little bit more, now I have to bring this to the center because the picture on towards the edges gets distorted. And this is the 26th, and in the 26th, there's Gemini. And so the moon is sitting right in front of Gemini. And again, this really happens. This is going to happen every month, really, because the moon goes through these cycles like that. It goes through the phases. You start out with a full moon. Well, it depends. Usually, you say you start at the new moon, and you'll see the crescent moon very low. We saw that with Mercury. Was that on the 11th? And then if you watch the moon every day, you see the moon appears to have moved quite a bit because it is orbited. And again, that's if you're going out at the same time. And also the lit side gets bigger, and eventually we move towards a full moon. And then past the full moon, it rises later in the evening. So right now we are even past the third quarter, and the moon will not rise until well after midnight. Really, you can think about it, somewhat before dawn, and it will be out there tomorrow morning as a crescent moon that you can possibly observe. I think it actually might even be in danger of being clear tomorrow morning. We might be able to do that. So you can sort of watch the passage of the moon and notice the change in phase. Now, when it's a full moon, it's very, very bright. When it's a quarter moon, and let's just bring it back to maybe more of a quarter moon. And I need to bring it so it's centered there. So one of those days where it's near Mars, it's more of a quarter moon, right? If you have binoculars or maybe even the zoom lens on a camera, and you look along this edge of light and dark, it's called the terminator. That's where basically on a first quarter moon, it's sunrise. And you can see, because the shadows are really long, you see a lot of detail that can be fun to look at. So and also at that point, you've got a little bit of a pairing with Mars as well. So these are some of the things that you can go out and enjoy, looking at the stars, looking at how the stars progress through the month, through the seasons, the moon throughout the months, and also the planets are, again, Mars will be out there for January, February, probably even into March. I really haven't looked that far ahead. So perhaps you'll get out there and do some of those things really, really soon. Now I'm going to take a look. And again, I just haven't been ignoring the chat. Well, I guess I have been ignoring the chat because I can't look at the chat and do all this at the same time. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to the question about the recording. It will likely be posted on the YouTube channel of the museum. And I will make sure that I get a message to the folks in the publicity and web department to see if they can get something out to everybody who was a participant when that gets posted. When will Mars be in retrograde? Retrograde motion, I think we talked about that a couple of sessions ago. As I showed you Mars moving, right? And let me do that again, that special way where the stars don't, whoops, I have to activate that window. Where the stars don't appear to move. We see Mars moving towards the east. And this is we'll say normal or typical, or what planets do most of the time. Now, when a planet gets to a position that's called opposition, then something happens. We kind of catch it in its orbit. We had Mars in retrograde motion a few months ago. What happens is now, in this view, the planets are going counterclockwise. All right, so Mars and Earth are going to our left. And so at some point back in the fall, Mars and the Earth and the sun were fairly well lined up. That's called opposition. And that's when the Earth is coming around and passing Mars on the inside lane, so to speak, right? That the Earth is closer to the sun. It moves faster in the orbit. And so it moves right past Mars. And that's when you have retrograde, is when the planets, a period, it starts a little bit before the planet goes into retrograde. I'm sorry, a little bit before the planet is at opposition and goes until a little after the planet's in opposition. So I don't think we get Mars in opposition for a while. I know we do get Jupiter and Saturn back in opposition later this year, so they will go into retrograde. And then, yes, I see a message there. Yes, this is right. We're talking things that pretty much you can see without any kind of aid. I mentioned perhaps if you had binoculars to look at the moon and look at that terminator, that might be something interesting. ISS, I see a comment about ISS data. Oh yeah, Joel, thank you. You know what? I got to remember to do that next month. We'll see if we can add that in next month. Okay, so the other thing we have tonight are some photographs from the Stars Club. Usually, as Rich mentioned, the Stars Over Springfield event at the museum would show, would have the possibility at least of having some telescope viewing. So we're going to have kind of virtual telescope viewing or vicarious telescope viewing, thanks to members of the Stars Club who are out there taking some pictures. So I'm going to start with one from Stars Club member Mike Balicki. And this is Mars. Mars has been overlooked lately, so I thought we'd give it a little bit of love. Mike happened to send in this picture. Mars is a really tough target for a backyard telescope to get a really, really great picture of. This one, and I don't know how well this will come across over Zoom, but Mars does have dark areas on the equator, and he did kind of get those dark areas there. And also the southern pole does have some ice on it now, and it looks possibly like he got some of that too. So what's happening though, Mars, if you remember that image I just had up, Mars is sort of moving away from us, or we're really moving away from Mars. We have come around the inside track and we have lapped Mars and we are moving on. And so the distance between us and Mars is increasing rather quickly, which means that Mars becomes a smaller and smaller object to try to look at through a telescope, and then you have to magnify it more to see anything. And it's again a tough thing to do with a backyard telescope.
That's a pretty good example of what it would look like to your eye through a telescope.
Yeah,
now we're a small scope where you just see a little hint of detail, but it's just such a small world. Most of the time, you're just lucky that you see that it's not a pinpoint, that it's an orb, and that's about it.
Yeah. So this is, again, yeah, these images are pretty much as you would be seeing them yourself, you know, no fancy processing or anything like that here. Okay, so Rich, the next ones, the rest of them I have are from you.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. So it advances. And so you just tell me when to advance.
Okay. What I've done is gather together some pictures of a pretty special event that happened in December, and we've been watching it approaching all year long. It's called a conjunction of the planets Jupiter and Saturn, and I think many people probably saw this as well. I know there was quite a bit of publicity beyond astronomical circles, so there was a lot of interest in this event. And I guess the best way to explain what happened that was so special, Kevin mentioned how the planets orbit around the sun. The closer planets orbit faster. A man and a famous astronomer from many centuries ago, Johannes Kepler, came up with some laws, and one of them says that the further out a planet is from the sun, the slower it moves in its orbit around the sun. And so we have Jupiter and Saturn, two of the two largest planets of the solar system, moving through the sky as they orbit the sun. They appear as bright points of light to the naked eye. Through a small telescope, you can easily see their orbs. So they're very good targets for backyard telescopes. But because Jupiter is closer to the sun than Saturn, it moves faster in its orbit. So they're both moving around the sun through the sky. And you might use as an analogy of what's going on. Let's use an automobile race like the Indianapolis 500, where you have a fast car and you have a slower car. And Jupiter's the fast car, Saturn's the slower car. And every 20 years, as they go around the lap at the Indianapolis 500, Jupiter laps Saturn, just like a faster car might lap a slower car. Over a period of months, Jupiter was getting closer and closer to Saturn in the night sky because it was moving faster. And then on December 21st, it caught up with Saturn and lapped it. And that was a pretty important event. It happens every 20 years. It's called a great conjunction, or a grand conjunction, because it involves the two biggest planets in the solar system and two very bright planets that are easily seen with the naked eye by anybody who cares to look at the sky. So every 20 years, there's an event like this. So why was there so much excitement this time? Well, depending on where these planets are in their orbits when Jupiter laps Saturn, determines how close together they come. And this time, the alignment was almost perfect. You have to imagine Jupiter's not physically moving close to Saturn. They're both in their orbits. They're both billions of miles apart, but they're all in a straight line from the Earth. Jupiter, Saturn, and the Earth are in a straight line. It's an alignment. And so from the Earth, they appear to be coming together in the sky from our vantage point. And this time on December 21st, they came so close together that they almost merged into a single point of light. And that was something that nobody alive had ever seen. In fact, the last time they were this close together, you would have to go back to the 13th century, to the year 1226, for people to have seen something similar to this. So obviously it was a pretty rare event, and that's what created so much excitement. The next time they'll be this close, it won't be so long of a wait, but it's still quite a ways off. It'll be in 2080. So that's a long span of time. The last one, 1226, the next one, 2080. So obviously a lot of folks in the astronomical community were anxious to see this rare event. And we've been watching it all year long. We've been keeping track of Jupiter and Saturn. And for a while, there were two bright points of light, spread apart in the sky, and little by little, they're getting closer and closer together. And as we approach December 21st, the excitement built greater and greater. But of course, there's always the one variable that nobody can predict, and that's the weather. And of course, a cloudy night on the 21st, after all that waiting and anticipation, could have wiped the whole thing out. And there was predictions of the whole northeastern quadrant of the United States would have poor weather on the night of the 21st, and that was predicted one day ahead. So we were a little bit bummed out, but we had been watching it for a while. And this was what's on the screen now is a picture that I took 3 days before their closest approach on December 18th. And the big picture is sort of like a naked eye view. You can see the moon in the upper right. For a couple of nights, the moon passed near the two planets and formed a pretty trio in the western sky. But if you look closely at the big picture toward the bottom, you can see Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter's brighter. Saturn is to the upper left of Jupiter, and they're very close together. The inset is a magnified view where you can see them separated a little easier. But the larger picture is about how it looked to the naked eye. So even on the 18th, they were shockingly close together. You never see Jupiter and Saturn that close. And in fact, they were so close for about a 1 week period even at moderately high power, they were both in the same field of view in the telescope. And that's something that nobody alive had ever experienced. Normally you have to look at Jupiter and then swing your telescope and you see Saturn, but you see them one at a time. But during that 1 week period centered on the 21st, you could see both planets in the same field of view. So that was pretty exciting. Next one, Kevin. Now, one thing that many amateur astronomers and stargazers quickly discover is that astronomy is a pretty exciting hobby. There's a lot of rare events. You know, there's so many different types of events: eclipses, occultations, transits, meteor showers, meteor storms, northern lights, fireballs, all kinds of different types of events that can happen in the sky. And some are extremely rare, but there's so many that every so often a rare event happens. And, you know, some people observe in solitude. They go in their backyard or they go to some dark sky site all by themselves and set up a telescope, and in peace and solitude, they watch the celestial event unfolding. But many stargazers, myself included, have quickly learned many years ago that it's a lot more fun to do stargazing in the company of friends. And that's one of the reasons we have a Springfield Stars Club, because people that love the night sky like to share their hobby with others and do it in the company of people that share their love of the night sky. So thanks to Stars Over Springfield, quite a few years ago, I met a man named Don Goulet who lives in Westfield, who's a very avid astronomy enthusiast, has a large telescopes. He does some really advanced photographic work. And he and his three daughters are into the night sky, into viewing the night sky. And these are some pictures that I took the night of the 21st. And in the pictures are my friend Don and his two daughters, Caitlin and Christina Goulet. And Caitlin is 12 years old. She's the young lady that edits the Starry Scoop that Kevin mentioned earlier. So you might have thought maybe it was a college professor or somebody that edited that newsletter. No, it's a young lady, 12 years old, who's an experienced stargazer, a longtime stargazer. She's gotten awards for stargazing, for completing observing projects, and she's an experienced astronomical photographer, and now she has her own newsletter. So that young lady's really going places in the astronomical world, and it was really great to share this event on the 21st with Don and Caitlin and Christina. So these pictures show them with their instrument. Don has a telescope that he uses for astrophotography, astronomical photography. It's an 8-inch f5 Celestron telescope, and 8 inches means that the tube is not 8 inches long, but the mirror is 8 inches in diameter, and that's a pretty good sized telescope, as you can see in the lower right picture, where you have the people near it for comparison. It's a good sized telescope, 8 inches wide concave mirror, which is used to create the image inside the telescope. And they have an electronic camera. It's not a digital camera that you use for snapshots, but it's a camera specifically made for astronomical photography that attaches to the telescope, and it feeds the image of whatever the telescope is seeing into a laptop, and it records it on a laptop. And once you've downloaded pictures through your telescope, you can manipulate them in certain ways to make them clearer and to bring out details. Some stargazers, if they were photographing, say, Jupiter, they would take hundreds of pictures and combine them all into a single image. So a small telescope like the one that Don used does the same type of photograph that a much larger observatory telescope would have done maybe 50 years ago. So we're really in a golden age of astronomical imaging, thanks to digital technology, where a small instrument can do incredible work. And they got some really good pictures. So we set up at the in the roadway, Rebecca Lobo Way, which is the road that leads into the Southwick Public Library. We had scouted out that location numerous times to make sure that the horizon would be low enough, and we chose that location for the critical night of December 21st, when Jupiter and Saturn would be closest. And what was required on that evening was a low southwestern horizon. You didn't want to obscure the two planets with trees or houses, or have ugly telephone pole wires in the foreground or what have you. And this, from that location, it was a nice low tree line, which gave an aesthetically beautiful view of the horizon. And it allowed us to hopefully see the planets for a while before they set, so that we could get some good pictures of them over a period of maybe 45 minutes or an hour. But as I said, they were predicting clouds for that night. We went out there anyway, because during the day there was some blue sky visible. So we tried to remain hopeful, and we set up our scopes. And there was sort of clouds and blue sky, but there was a big wall of clouds, dark, ominous gray clouds moving towards us from the south. And boy, we were really bummed out. We were trying to calculate how long before those clouds would cover up the southwestern sky. We thought maybe we'd get to glimpse Jupiter and Saturn for a few minutes, and then they'd be obscured by clouds, and that would be it. But we had our telescopes at the ready, just in case, because you never know. And it was like a miracle. That big wall of gray clouds moved toward the planets, and then it just disintegrated. It disappeared. And the sky kept getting darker, and suddenly the whole southwestern sky was clear. And we were just ecstatic, but it was still early twilight. It wasn't quite dark enough yet. But we said, we got to find Jupiter quickly. Jupiter was the brighter of the two, so we figured we'd find it in binoculars, so that we could have our telescopes all set to go in case more clouds showed up. And we were all competing to find it. And Caitlin won that race. We were all scanning the sky, and all of a sudden Caitlin yelled out, "There it is, I found it, I found it." And she showed us where it was, and we got all our telescopes trained on Jupiter, and you could see Saturn right next to it. And as the sky darkened, the southwest stayed clear. And we had about 45 minutes to see the two planets at their closest they've been since the year 1226 from Southwick, from near the Southwick Library. And we took pictures of them. And then after a while, fog started to form, ground fog, and it really gave it a kind of a surrealistic, eerie look. It was really a breathtaking scene for a while, and eventually the ground fog obscured the planets when they were very low. But we had about, I think, 45 minutes to an hour to view them. So how about the next picture, Kevin?
Yeah, that's good. I had like 10 minutes.
Yeah, the upper picture there shows what we were looking at before it got dark enough. And right where that telescope is aimed, that's the telescope that Don used in his camera, is attached where the eyepiece normally goes, and there's a wire coming off the camera that hooks it to the iPad, to the laptop. And you can see the direction that it's aimed is not looking very good. So there was a while there where, we were pretty bummed out about it, but then it was just so exciting when the sky cleared. It was just unbelievable. And a lot of my friends in New England missed it. I don't know what happened. We were just lucky. We had a clear spot in that direction, and it was just synchronized perfectly. The middle picture is me with my telescope. I used a 5-inch f5 refractor. So Don's telescope has an 8-inch concave mirror that forms the image that gets magnified. My telescope has a 5-inch diameter lens that also forms an image that gets magnified. And like Don, I took the eyepiece out and replaced it with a camera in order to take pictures. And we also took what we call fixed tripod pictures, like the one I showed prior to this one, where the camera is just mounted on a tripod aimed at the sky so that you get wide angle pictures. But we wanted to use telescopes to zoom in close to the two planets, so close together. And the bottom picture is Ed Fates, who lives in Southwick. He's a former president of the Springfield STARS Club. And as you can see, he's got a giant reflecting telescope, and he's preparing to attach his camera to get some pictures as well. So we had about a half a dozen other stargazers show up along that roadway socially distanced along the roadway leading to the Southwick Library. And that will forever be a special site as the location from which we saw this rare event. Next picture. This is one of my wide angle pictures, and you can see this one, the ground fog is already forming. So what a cool effect at the bottom of the picture. Instead of a snowy field that we were looking over, you see this grayish fog, and the trees just kind of rise up out of the fog. And, you know, it was kind of obscuring the bottom portion of the picture, but where Jupiter and Saturn are just above center, you know, it's still clear sky and you can see some stars above them, but they're very close together. You have to get real close to the screen and you might see Saturn to the upper right of Jupiter. There were a lot of speculation that perhaps the two planets would merge together and look like a single point of light. There were even comparisons to the star of Bethlehem, which might have been a similar conjunction, but we could see them as they were very close together, but you could see both planets that night. Next one. And here's another a picture, not quite as much fog in this one. And again, I did an inset so you can see how close Jupiter is to Saturn in the upper right. That's a little bit of magnification, but the bottom picture shows the way it looked to your eye, where you had to look really carefully and then you could just barely see that it wasn't one point of light, but there was another one right near it, Jupiter and Saturn. And just imagine, nobody alive had seen this view until that night since the year 1226. Incredible. Next one. This is a picture I took through my 5-inch refracting telescope. As I said, I replaced the eyepiece with a camera and focused on the planets. And boy, you can't wear gloves when you're manipulating cameras and eyepieces and little thumb screws and all that. So my hands were going numb from the cold, but I was so excited, you know, to get that camera hooked up, and it was a little bit of a challenge focusing and getting everything going with frozen hands. But finally everything was set and I got it into focus and took some pictures. And the lower left is, of course, Jupiter. It has a slightly oval shaped orb because it's a gas giant planet and it rotates very rapidly. So it bulges out at the equator, and you can actually notice that it has an oval shape because of that. And you can see 4 tiny points of light near Jupiter. Those are the 4 moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, that Galileo was the first to see back in the early 1600s. And you can see those moons pretty easily through a backyard telescope. And to the upper right is Saturn, which has an oval shape because it has rings around it. And I overexposed it because I wanted to show the moons of Jupiter, because that's a kind of a distinctive characteristic of Jupiter, those 4 moons that trail it through the sky like a miniature solar system. So I overexposed the picture, which kind of washed out Saturn's rings, and it turned Saturn into just an oval shape instead. But you can tell that it's Saturn, and there they are at their closest in the same field of view. Is that my last one, Kevin?
I think there's one. Yeah, this is the
okay,
last one here.
Yeah, this one took a little bit of work because I took pictures on quite a few different nights using zoom lenses and different types of lenses. And what I decided after we were successful on the 21st, seeing it at its closest, I wanted to do a sequence of images. So I picked 4 nights that I had a good clear sky during the month of December, but to keep all the pictures at the same scale with one another, so it would show the proper comparison of the distance, I found 2 stars that are in the upper part of the pictures, the 2 brightest stars in the constellation Capricornus, and I kept those 2 stars, yep, right there, and to the lower left of that one. There's another star just to the lower left of the one, Kevin, yeah, right there. I kept those 2 stars as kind of a yardstick, the same distance apart in each one of these 4 pictures. So it shows Jupiter overtaking Saturn in its orbit during the month of December, and then finally catching it on the 21st. And they're also getting lower and lower as the month wore on, because the Earth is orbiting the sun, and so they were gradually settling into the western sky. And as Kevin said, they're so low now you can barely see Jupiter anymore. But that's why the two planets are not only closing in on each other, but they're also descending toward the southwestern horizon as the Earth revolves around the sun. So we're seeing two motions reflected in the sky at the same time, and different types of sky conditions and exposures, you know, cause the sky to appear different shades of blue and gray. But it was a pretty exciting run, you know, and a long buildup. We've been watching this go on for months as the two planets came closer and closer. And boy, am I happy we lucked out on the 21st. Very, very exciting event. That and Comet Neowise earlier in the year made it quite an exciting year for astronomy. And we had a beautiful Geminid meteor shower in December with one meteor every minute for a while. So it was a pretty, despite all the sadness and pain and suffering, people that were looking to the heavens were uplifted and had some pretty exciting things to kind of help them forget about the negative things going on and focus on the beauty of the night sky.
Yeah, let's see, Rich, we have, trying to think of what we have else to look forward to this year.
Well, we have we have what's called an annular eclipse.
Yeah, the eclipse is
That's going to
probably the
happen in,
highlight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to happen on June 10th. And eclipses of the sun are a little tricky because, and we'll be talking about this as the date approaches, but we may have to try to drum up some solar filter eclipse glasses to send out to people if we can find some that are left over from 2017. But you need something to protect your eyes to look at a solar eclipse. But what's happening on June 10th is that in a different part of the country, further west, the moon is going to pass in front of the sun, but the moon is further from the Earth, and the moon's orbit around the Earth is oval shaped, and the moon is at its furthest reaches from the Earth. So the moon looks a little bit smaller in the sky, and it's not quite big enough to cover the entire sun. So instead of having a total eclipse where it gets dark and the stars come out during the daytime, like we had a few years ago, when the moon is centered on the sun, people will see a ring of sunlight, a complete ring, or an annulus, which is why we call it an annular eclipse. An annulus is a ring, and it'll be a ring of sunlight. We won't see that from New England. People out west will see that, but from New England, the sun will rise in the morning partially eclipsed. So when the sun rises from Massachusetts, the eclipse will be underway, and it gives us an opportunity to see something that's pretty rare and pretty unusual. When the sun is partially eclipsed, it looks like a crescent moon, and as it comes above the horizon, we may see two horns come up above the horizon, which will be the cusps of that crescent sun, with the moon covering a good portion of it. So we won't see a complete ring, but we may see two horns of sunlight come up above the horizon if the horizon is clear right down to the tree line. And that's something that might make for an interesting picture. So we're hoping that'll be clear on that day. And but again, we'll talk more about it when the time comes, when the date draws near. But you will need to protect your eyes. You don't want to try to squint or look through a makeshift filter, because people have burned their retinas from the heat of the sun and caused blindness. So you have to be very careful, but we'll explain that more as that date approaches. And hopefully that'll be another exciting sky event that we'll have clear weather, and we'll walk away from it excited. And
but and again, I don't think we can emphasize it enough. This is something, yes, you do need special equipment for this. You cannot try to see this, and it has to be filtered glasses that are specifically made for this purpose.
What we might do is, if I can find my supply of glasses from 2017. We might be able to have people send like self-addressed stamped envelopes or something. I think I saved some. Otherwise, we'll see if there's a source of them. But you will need something like that.
Yeah, yeah. There probably will be a source again. Yeah. So that's great. Yeah. So that's probably the most, I don't know what unusual event coming up for the year. And then we can, always hope for a couple of good meteor showers during the year. But then also these, there won't be historic conjunctions perhaps, but as I showed you earlier, you always get a little something each month as those planets move around, as the moon moves around. And it's really, I think this last picture also shows it. If you're looking at it steadily, it really adds, I think, a little bit to the experience, that not only did you see them that close, but you saw them getting closer and closer. Or when you go out, you see, hey, you see whatever it is you decide to notice, and you do notice, and you can watch that change over the weeks. So looks like that's all we have for you tonight. Thank you, thank you, Sharon, for your very kind comment there, and thanks to everybody for coming. I don't think I see any new questions or anything in the chat. Thanks to everyone. Thanks for all your kind comments. So we will be doing this event virtually first Friday of the month. Now, yeah, I know this wasn't really the first Friday, but it was New Year's, the first Friday. So it will be the first Friday of the month coming up now throughout the spring. We'll be doing this virtually the whole time. So so you're welcome to everyone. Thank you for your kind comments, and look up. We hope that you get to see some fun things, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great month.